Shalom. So I am here with Jeff P from the Bridges of Meaning server. He is one of the moderators. He is also honestly the most Jesus-like person I know. He loves when I say stuff like that.
That just means you don't know me very well.
I'm not so sure. The more I get to know you, the more I feel like you're a very, very Jesus-like person. But so we went on the fishing trip together, where we did zero fishing,
Yep.
and that was the best part of it, even though I actually like fishing. Um, and you're from Texas, and we
Yeah.
met up in Arkansas. And next year, hopefully, we're going to do it again. I'm thinking we might want to do it a little bit further up north, but weekend right after, either on 4th of July weekend or the weekend after seems like a good idea. You had family commitments, so you came a little bit later than most people. Well, most people, there was only a few of us there, and left a little earlier. But as far as doing it again, what do you think about the fishing trip, and what do you think about doing it again, and what did you like and what did you think we could improve on?
Well, the first thing I'll say is it's always great to get to meet people in person that you've only met and interacted with online. And typically when those online interactions are somewhat positive to very positive, it's really nice to be able to get together with people like that for the first time. That's always exciting. I think I said something like, everybody looks, the same as they look online, but they also look really different. And I don't know how to explain that other than having the experience of getting to meet people in person that you've interacted with or watched have other conversations like this online.
Oh, I forgot to mention, you also run the Randos United channel.
I do, yeah. I'm on there sometimes, but most of the time I like to have the spotlight on other people. So, people from the Bridges of Meaning community early on didn't really have their own channels that they had started yet. And there were just conversations that were happening all over the place as soon as Bridges of Meanings launched and people were able to get hyper connected that way online, at least. And so it was an early platform for some of the first the early adopters of Bridges of Meaning to start putting their conversations out there into the world. So that's what that channel was initially for, was just a platform for people who hadn't or didn't know how or just didn't have any interest in starting their own. So it's still a place for people on Bridges of Meaning. Like if you want to put your conversations out there and you don't want to do it on your own YouTube channel, or you don't know anything about doing a YouTube channel, it's there. So I'll just put the advertisement out there if people want to have that platform. I don't know if people feel like it's restricted or they can't use it or whatever. It's really not. I'll put this out there. There is an email address if you want to send a video that you'd like to have out there. It's just randosunited@gmail.com. So I'll say that for how many people did you say are going to be watching this, Jacob?
Well, I think my video with Luke got 60 or 70 votes, and I mean views, and obviously you're a lot more popular than Luke.
No, that's not true.
But so we were talking about the. Oops! I hope you can't hear the dogs fighting outside. You can.
I can. Yeah.
My neighbor's dogs are fighting. That's not my dog, as you know. My dog is incredibly well behaved, which has
Yes.
nothing to do with me.
He's
But
very shy as well.
but we were talking about the fishing trip, and you were telling me what you liked about it. What would you have improved about it?
Oh, wow. I mean, if I could just wave a magic wand and improve it, it's always an improvement to have more people. So if there's a way to put an event like that together, either a similar kind or even something different, I've had some behind the scenes talks with some people who are trying to, coordinate like larger conversational events that we could maybe bring people, like bring some of the quote unquote big names in this little community to, obviously have someone like Paul there, have
It
other
would be
people.
nice to have Paul there, but honestly, I just remember Friday night, you arrived what, around midnight or 1?
Yeah, midnight.
And and we stayed up. It was like getting light by the time we went to bed.
Yeah, I think we went to bed just a little bit before 6 in the morning.
Yeah, yeah. And I didn't have any trouble because I was sleeping in my SUV, but you guys had to put up your tents after we stopped talking.
Right.
It
That wasn't too bad.
it probably would have been smarter to put up the tents while we were talking.
Probably, probably so. I mean, but that, yeah, I mean, you did ask me what I liked about it. I'll go back to that. I mean, that was probably the most enjoyable time of the trip, is when we first got there and we first got to talk. It seems like, I mean, I was a little more exhausted Saturday, and we did have lunch where a couple more people showed up. Shelly and Lance showed up, and we were able to eat and chat, which is nice. But I don't know, there was just something about when I first arrived and, getting to meet you in person for the first time, and Sam and Charlie, all of us just getting to sit down. And I don't know what you guys have been talking about before. I assume it was really good as well. But when I got there, I was just interested in finding out more about, each person. To use a Petersonianism, I had a very low resolution picture of each one of you. Maybe a little bit higher resolution with some than others that I had interacted with, more often, but really just getting to know. I think the question that I asked was, walk me through the series of events that, brought you here tonight, sitting around this campfire.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that was really interesting to hear everybody's stories. And so that's one of the reasons why I like Paul's channel so much. That's one of the reasons why I created Randos United in the first place, is because I just wanted to hear more about people's stories. And so, I don't know, it's just interesting to me.
Well, it was also definitely a lot more intimate, as much as, even in direct messages, we certainly we have a lot of interaction on the server. Although, funny enough, while you are definitely always present on the server, you're not always interacting on the server, which is
Right.
interesting. Because you know me, I'm that mouthy Jew. um, but and then there's more, there's more personal interaction, I think, in DMs. I certainly have a lot more interaction with some people on DMs. And I even started my own server, kind of like a, um, it's kind of like a off, a small little click in a bigger thing.
Yeah.
Um, but that just the four of us, real life, there's no record. We were sitting there, we were talking, um, and we got very, very intimate there.
Hmm.
And I think that's something that cannot really be achieved, even when you're having discussions, and they're not recorded. You're in the voice chat or something. It's very different when you're there in real life. You're physically present with someone.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason I think it's so important that we try to manifest this community in physical space.
Hmm.
I really wanted, I really want to do it again, and not necessarily, yeah, I guess it would be really nice if Jordan Peterson actually showed up, but but that's more of big audience, person in the on stage thing, than the type of small group, the four of us sitting there talking, sharing, bonding. And so, yeah, I guess, I mean, we kind of talked about next time having it near Chicago or in Chicago, um, partially because obviously Sam lives there.
Mhm.
Part there is, I mean, he and Hank, and I guess they have their meetup there. But um, I thought another good reason to have it in Chicago is because it's such an air hub that plane tickets are going to be cheap enough. You know, I drove, I took a week driving to get there
Mhm.
and a week driving to get back, and it was fun and everything. But lots of people, there were several people who wanted to come and had planned to come, but work and everything got too busy. Um, so having some place that is central so that more people can come, and it doesn't have to be, I mean, obviously PBK would be great to have there, but I think if that, you know, while we were having those conversations at night, if Paul had actually been there, in some ways, I think it would have detracted from the conversation.
Mhm. Yeah, maybe so.
So
Yeah.
we need to have both types, I guess.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I didn't mean to indicate that we should have one instead of the other, but just maybe some different some options maybe. Uh, but yeah, I guess you asked what did I like, what things did I like about it, what to improve it. Um, yeah, even if it has big people, quote unquote, big people there, or not, or little people like us, more opportunities for people who have interacted with each other in this space to be able to do it in person. I think is a really good thing for all of the reasons that you mentioned, and probably more that we're not even aware of. Um, and then as far as it happening again, I think it's good. Um, and then I would definitely like to go again, and somewhere in a central part of the US. Chicago is a good hub. Dallas is a good hub as well. Just not in July unless it's indoors.
Well,
But
also,
who
I mean,
knows?
I was thinking part of, I was talking to Nolan recently, and he's in Canada, Andrea's
Oh
in
yeah.
Canada, Sherry's in Canada, um, and we have the Europeans.
Hmm.
I I don't know if anybody's like gonna fly in from Europe, and Job's kid is gonna be too young for him to fly in. But
Hmm.
um, yeah, it would be nice for it to be central enough that um, that we could get a broader slice. I would hope. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe, well, okay. So let me put it this way. I would love it if people who are at all interested in any way of attending, um, to please comment below, talk about when you would want to see such things, where you would want to see it, what would make it possible for you to come, what would keep you from coming, and what kind of activities. I think we're going to have to call it the fishing trip, but probably we're not going to fish at all ever. I think I kind of like that joke. Um, and but and I think definitely having at least small, ways of small groups of people getting together and just talking is, I mean, it's very central to who we are.
It
Um,
is. Just real quick, should we tell everyone why we didn't fish on this last trip?
I didn't know there was a reason. Why didn't we fish on this last trip?
Well, I thought we were supposed to have poles provided.
We did
And
have poles. There, oh no, there were poles.
were there poles?
There were poles. Yes. Oh no. But I know that certainly Charlie brought poles,
Uh-huh.
and so a lot of things. I mean, I brought. So we talked about a lot of things we were gonna do, including so. Um, some people will have gotten the benchers that
Mhm.
I printed.
Yep.
Um, and in case for anybody who doesn't know what a bencher is, it's a small table companion prayer book that gets printed in mostly Orthodox Jewish circles for weddings, bar mitzvahs, that type of thing, and what are called Shabbatons, which are like, you know, Saturday like conferences where people get together, and it has songs and some prayers and the Kiddush in it. And so Charlie had asked because he wanted to see what a traditional Kiddush looks like.
Mm.
So I mean, I brought supplies and stuff to do a traditional Kiddush, and at first I was just gonna print something out, and I'm like, you know what, I'll so that people would have, would be able to look at the prayers and have them there. And I'm like, well, why don't I actually actually print get benchers printed like they do for weddings and bar mitzvahs. And benchers are actually pretty cheap to get printed. The the postage, I ended up sending them to people. The postage actually was more expensive than the bencher.
Oh my gosh.
But uh, so and I only printed so many, so not everybody got, and I kind of felt bad about that. So if you didn't get a bencher, I'm sorry. Next year we'll print more, and maybe we'll figure out a way that anybody who wants can get them. If I actually I didn't think most people would actually even be interested. Like, it's like, okay, what is this? But when I offered them to people, people really seemed to like them, so I sent them out to some people. um but so I had bought all the things to do a kiddush that Friday night, and we were waiting for you to arrive, and you got there, and we just got to talking so much we never ended up doing kiddush at all. So and we had planned on Sunday possibly going to a church. At first we were going to go to an Eastern Orthodox church with somebody who didn't show up. uh, eh, but or Charlie was gonna, and he did a small sermon just for Sam and me, but have a little. But we made a lot of plans for things we thought, activities, things we thought we would do, and we just got to talking so much we didn't actually do them.
Right.
Which is actually kind of like the best way for it to do. Like, certainly we were not bored.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I had known that that's what you had planned for Friday night, I wouldn't have just showed up and been so talkative. I'd have been like, well, let's do this, let's do the venture that you were planning.
Yeah, I mean, next time. But yeah, no, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. Um, yeah, but I kind of, in retrospect, like taking the challahs home without actually using them, the breads I had bought and stuff.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
yeah, it was kind of, eh. And we didn't drink nearly as much as I thought we would.
Right.
We drank less than half the beer I brought. Yeah. So
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
yeah. I mean, honestly, I don't think any of us are really the drinking type very much.
Yeah.
So um okay, so I I want to hear more about and you said you've talked about it on Randos United and I haven't seen the video. I probably will have to go watch that as well. But um, you said you had a religious experience with Jesus very, very young, which you remember very, very well.
Yes.
And I want to hear more about that.
Yeah. So I was raised from the time I can remember. I was raised in a Christian church community. Um, and so in that church community, I remember being taught about Jesus. Um, they believed in Trinitarian theology, that Jesus and God are one, and that somehow that all mixes together, and it's not polytheism. It's the Trinity workaround that says no, it's one God, but it's in three persons. And I speak light of that. I'm not trying to disparage it. I know that you have some opinions on that, Jacob, and I'm not going to fight you on them. I'm not Charlie, and I'm not I'm not.
But you are a Trinitarian. You do believe in the Trinity.
Yeah, I mean, for all intents and purposes, I guess as best as that's understood, yes. I have no reason not to believe it. But anyway, the experience that I remember having, I want to say I was 4 years old. And I do remember, Sunday school teachers or other people in church just talking about, asking Jesus to come into your heart and, inviting him to be Lord of your life, and all these different ways of saying it. And I remember we had a children's Bible when I was young, a picture Bible. And it had, what's Moses's mom's name? Yeah,
You'll have it.
yeah. There was a picture of her putting Moses down into the reeds, into the water in the basket. There was another picture at the very end of the Bible that I remember. And it was the only thing that talked about the book in the Christian Bible of Revelation. And it didn't really get into anything. It just said that Jesus gave his friend John a vision. And it had like Jesus knocking on a door. And I want to say the door had like the little, not the well, it's not a peephole, but it's the little door where you can open it and look out and see who it is and close it. And it's basically like Jesus knocking on the door of his friend John to like let him in or something like that. And so I had these pictures in my mind, both the word pictures and these actual visual images of, different things. And, I've talked about this before. I want to say I like wrote it in a blog post somewhere at some point where I was talking about like ideas about reality. And even as a 4-year-old, I pictured the idea of whenever, so I'll go to the experience itself. I was in the bathroom at the house that we lived in. And I just remember feeling a presence in that room and inviting me.
In the bathroom.
Yeah, I was in the bathroom. Like I felt like there was a person there, like an actual presence of a person that was there and essentially saying, hey, go ahead, invite me into your heart. And, maybe I had an image of a tiny little Jesus that was somewhere knocking on the door of my heart saying, let me in or something like that, And so I did. I was like, okay, yeah, sure. And I understood that presence to be the Jesus that everybody was talking about in church that I grew up in and in the Bible, that I had as a kid. And looking back on that as an adult, I feel like from that moment, I have always had that presence with me in my life, for better or for worse. Usually, well, all times in the for worse, it's just me ignoring that presence. It's me, going against what I know that presence or that person, might want from me in a particular moment, or, how I was conducting myself in life. But there's been seasons where I've tried to really focus on that person being there, and other times where it's just like, I just want to do what I want to do. Yeah, you're here, but I don't care what you think, or something like that. Um, so yeah, I haven't been able to shake him, that presence, whoever others might call him. I know him as Jesus, and how that works in Trinitarian theology between who Jesus called the Father and who Jesus is. I don't know how to make that distinction. Um, so I don't debate for it or against it, because I really don't have good reasons or arguments for it. I just know I have this experience, and that's kind of who I associate this person as.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. So I'm actually kind of intrigued. I want to ask you a lot about the theology that you grew up with and stuff, but it seems that there 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 seems to be an Anabaptist character to you, right? Where it's it's things are a lot more simple and less theological, and um, I think a lot of people have very complex theologies and thought structures, and um, it seems to me, from what I've gotten to know about you, um, as much as it is, as philosophically, supposedly, it's very faith centered, I've actually found you to be, and I hope this isn't coming out the wrong way, but very works oriented, in terms of you seem to. I'm very impressed, for example, with you sitting there and writing the Bible out, right, longhand, right? Um, and it wasn't a theological, it doesn't seem to me like it was some, oh well, this I believe that this is, going through all the reasons why this might be the best spiritual practice or whatever, but it seems to me that it was a lot of, okay, I want to get to know the Bible better, and what better way than to sit there and actually write it out longhand.
Yeah,
Um,
it
and
was more.
yeah,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, go ahead, please.
Um, I think it was a confluence of a bunch of different things that got me to start that practice. It was probably about 4 years ago that I started, and I I can't remember if it was spawned by doing Peterson's self-authoring program or not, because I did do that. Um, it was probably before that. I want to say it started before that. Um, but I was looking for a spiritual practice. I was also considering a career change at that time, and I really had no idea what I wanted to do, what I wanted to shift into. Um, I've had this idea for a story that I wanted to either write or do some kind of graphic novel version of it. From the time I was like a kid, like my brother and I kind of bounced these ideas off of each other for like this story. And I used to draw quite a bit when I was a teenager, and I read comic books, and I would try to emulate, all the different artists. I'm actually wearing a T-shirt of one of my favorite artists from the '90s, Todd McFarlane. So I tried to copy Todd McFarlane a lot when I was a kid, when I was a teenager. So anyway, the point that I'm getting to is I started thinking about, well, I want to do some kind of spiritual discipline. I just want to be able to take things in on a non-conscious level. I want to do things that maybe encourage, like I had started like trying to draw again and do a bunch of different drawing exercises to see if maybe that's a direction that I wanted to go. But I was kind of hitting up against a wall with those, and I was just like, well, let me take a break from that. And then handwriting something is it's sort of like doing art, because you're forming these things. And what better, and I also wanted to learn about stories. So what better way to combine all of those things than to follow these stories that are written down and have been with us for, since time immemorial. As we have a general idea of how long they've been written down, an idea, but how long they've been a part of oral tradition, no one knows, right? No one really knows. We have guesses about that too, but, or I would guess we have guesses about that too. I don't know, I haven't researched it. I'm sure you know a ton more about that. But anyway, I wanted to start doing that. That all kind of clicked together as I could bring all of these things together in this practice. And I think the thing that first planted the seed of the idea, I've talked about this before. There's a podcast out there called Bible Project. The animation studio based in Portland, I want to say. But I was listening to their
am not
podcast.
a fan.
Say again, not a fan?
I am not a fan of the Bible Project, but keep on going.
Well, the seed that they planted, they were, I get things from all different kinds of places, and it's usually doesn't even have anything to do with what they're talking about. I'll just pick up something and it's just like, oh yeah, I know you're talking about this other thing over here, but something that you said right there sparked interest in me about something completely different. And I can't remember what the topic of their podcast was about, but they pointed to a verse or a couple of verses. I want to say it's in Deuteronomy, and now I can't remember what it was. I had it written down, and I used to remember it. But there was something in the law there that talked about how the king, if you do have a king, the king needs to write out the scroll of this law. And you probably can quote that verbatim. But that I was like, oh, because it talked about, I think at the time I was, definitely at the time I was a manager of a couple of different departments in my company. And I was just like, wow, this talks about how you can, become a better leader. That's what I associated with it.
It does.
And I was just like, okay, well, that wouldn't be a bad thing. And so I had that seed that was sitting there, and then that came together with all of these other things. And I just sat down and decided to start doing it, because I also like to do things that I've never heard of other people doing before. I'm very anti-trendy. I don't know. I'm probably not self-aware enough to where some people who hear me say that are just like, what are you talking about? I don't know. They could probably point out some examples to me where I'm just like, yeah, you're right. I probably am trendy, but I like to think that I don't like to do things that everybody else is doing. I'm very like that. I dig my heels in sometimes and don't do things that are just otherwise normal, that people are just like, yeah, come on, let's go do it. I'm just like, I don't want to. Everybody's doing it. It's stupid. So anyway, that kind of fed into this as well. I was just like, oh, wow, I've never really heard of anybody doing that either. At least not current day. Of course, there were people who dedicated their lives to that. The scribes who were, continuing to maintain the written word. So anyway, yeah, I don't know that you asked me a question, but that's just kind of the genesis of it all. And
that's really interesting, because actually, yeah, I was just listening to, there's a rabbi who was going through the Greek Bible. He has a YouTube series, and he was actually exactly talking about that particular commandment for the king to write his own, because there's a general commandment that each person should write a Sefer Torah, should write a complete 5 books of Moses. And generally how that's done in Jewish communities is people get together and they commission a scribe to write one, right? And that's considered uh, performing that, because not everybody knows how to sit there and actually, the calligraphy is actually very difficult.
Hmm.
And if you ever open up an actual Torah scroll. And the king is also, he's supposed to write one because um being a king, he may become haughty and full of himself. And part of, there is that concept of engaging with the word of God is, and God's commandments, is humbling and makes you a better leader. So that's so interesting that you were actually thinking along those lines, which is, yeah, what it does say there in Deuteronomy. I don't have the verses memorized, but um
I
yeah.
just assume, Jacob, that you have the entire Bible memorized and can just
Oh,
quote it to me whenever you feel like it.
no, I have. So a lot of the things that I have memorized are actually from the prayers, because for 10 years I was very observant, and that includes saying the prayers 3 times a day, every day,
Hmm.
right? I used to spend a good 2 hours a day praying for those 10 years. Um, which leads me to my other question. Uh, so you did Exodus 90.
Did.
Why?
Oh wow. I can give the short version of this. I can point people to the conversation I had on Paul's channel about this, where I probably go into a lot more detail. Um, I felt like I needed a change at the time. Um, I wasn't, I felt like I was living for myself too much. And Exodus 90 encourages you to focus on living for others. And I felt like it's something that I needed to do. And I made an 11th hour decision to jump in with the little cohort that was going to start it, because it starts the first week of January each year. Apparently, this is, for those who don't know, Exodus 90 is like it's a Catholic program. I don't know what else to call it. It's like if you are familiar with what Lent is in the Christian tradition, um, it's like Lent on steroids. It's like a 3-month Lent, where I think Lent is only 40 days. Exodus 90 is 90 days of a lot of different disciplines that you have to adhere to. And you have to start off with, in the corporate world, it's called a mission statement. In Exodus 90, it's called my why, or my reason. And so you have to write out your own personal reason for why you're committing to this, and committing to other people who are in it, that you're going to support one another, and have daily check-ins with, your, oh man, it's been it's been so long, I forget what we call them. I want to just call it your buddy, but there's an actual name for it. I forget what it's called. But anyway, why did I do it? Yeah, that's the short reason, is because I felt like I didn't have enough time for myself. There wasn't enough me time. And when I got a chance at the end of 2020 to have some time off for work and just try to focus on just doing all the things that I wanted to do, they were, I found them to be barren. to be empty. I wasn't getting the thing the harder that I tried to get, whatever it was I thought I was trying to get, the more the returns diminished. And so I just felt like I just feel really miserable. I feel like my, my relationships are very dull. Dull is the wrong word. They're just off. And so I said, I'm just going to dive in and do this. And there were several different things that you were adhering to, like no internet, no TV, only to be used
No hot showers. That's what
for
killed
work.
me.
Right.
Yeah.
Only cold showers, but they're supposed to be fast. You could take quick cold showers, but I don't know how clean you can get if you take it too quickly. So you have to spend some time in there. It's not as easy to get soap to lather in cold water as it is in warm water. So yeah, by far that was the hardest part for me. But it wasn't, it was no walk in the park, but at the same time, it was really good. And then after 3 months, there was a re-entry period. Like for some people, they just went like hog wild, because you're not supposed to eat sweets. You're not supposed to eat anything between meals. Again, no television, no internet. And so, one of the first things that I did was go try to catch up on some of the most interesting, conversations that were out there on YouTube that I could find. But yeah, it was a good experience. Right after we did it, some of the people who were in it said, "So, would you do this again next year?" And I can't remember if it was my answer or somebody else's, but I agreed with it 100%. It was like January of 2022 seems way too close for me to answer yes to that question right now.
And you're still thinking you're not going to do it next year?
I have less of a hard stance on it than I did coming right out of it. I would say right now I'm maybe 30% yes, 25 to 30% that I would say yes to it. Again, we'll see how I feel in December. But it was definitely a very good exercise. I got to learn a few things about myself that I didn't know. Got to decide, what practices that I got from it that I wanted to keep. Primarily, one of the ones is, daily prayer, because that wasn't something that I was doing on a consistent basis before. It's something that I try to do now, in addition to my daily handwriting of the Bible project.
How much time do you spend writing the Bible every day?
Oh, maybe 5 minutes.
Okay. And so we calculated you're 40% through the Hebrew Bible so far. And that's 2/3 of the Bible. So you're probably about 1/3 of the way through the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So have you gone back and actually seen because my biggest question would actually be what kind of scribal errors I would make if I did that, because I'm sure, I don't know if it's as bad the first time as the 30th time you're sitting there as a monk having to write through the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have to wonder, what's the experience been like?
I have enjoyed it. When I first started doing it, it's very similar to my Exodus 90 experience. I was really amped up about it for the first, couple of weeks of Exodus 90. And then I started to realize, oh my gosh, I haven't even gotten close to halfway through this thing. I'm really in this thing for 3 months. This is going to be a while. So very similar with when I started writing out the Bible. I was just like, all right, here we go. We start with Genesis 1 in the beginning, and this is going to be cool. And to add some to add a level of interest and engagement to it for me, I picked the Message version of the Bible. And I think one person left feedback of, why would you pick that one? That's horrible. That's the worst possible thing that you could go with. And maybe it is. I don't know. But I wanted to see all of these stories that I either had pretty good familiarity with or some level of familiarity with, or even some of the ones where just like, oh my gosh, I've never really even paid attention to that part of, you know, the biblical narrative at all. Wow, I didn't know this was in here. I wanted to have that presented to me in like as plain a language as possible so that I could maybe better understand what was going on. It's not necessarily true. It doesn't matter how plain a language you put it in. Sometimes it's really hard to penetrate what's going on in a particular story. So that was interesting when I started up to go see, okay, cool. Yeah, this is what's happening. I do remember having a very visceral experience with Moses going up the mountain, of almost feeling like I was there walking with him, and you know, all the smoke and the clouds and all that kind of stuff. And I was just like, oh wow. And the best way that I can describe it, and I don't mean this to be like flippant or sacrilegious or blasphemous or anything like that. It's just the closest thing that I can bring to what it kind of felt like, as far as how it really felt like I was there. Is this is a bad example, I think, because as I'm thinking about saying it, I don't really know how this connects, but there's a scene in one of the Harry Potter movies, which I'm not a Harry Potter fan, but I've watched the films. I haven't read the books.
The books are much better than the film.
So there's like a scene that I remember, and it's like a very dark background, and the only light that's in the scenes is like almost the lightsaber kind of juicy type substance that's flying back and forth between Voldemort and Harry when their wands are like shooting at each other. And there was something about that scene, like that's the closest thing that, as I'm thinking back to as I was riding through, you know, Moses going up the mountain, like, I don't know, there was just something very tactile about how, you know, it wasn't just like, it didn't, the way they did the special effects in that movie, in that scene, it seemed like there was substance to what was bouncing back and forth between their wands. And that same feeling of substance of, oh, this isn't merely an image or an illusion on a screen. It feels like there's real weight. There's real, what's the Hebrew word? Kavod?
Oh yeah, kavod. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, weight to it. So
Yes.
yeah, so the word kavod has to do with weight and heavy.
Yeah.
So, but the way it's usually translated is glory, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about the clouds of glory, the anane hakavod, right? I tend to, my personal translation of kavod is gravitas, because I
Mm-hmm.
think that kind of gives both meanings right there.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting that you say that, because so one of the things that doesn't translate very well is in the Hebrew, when you're talking the about Mount Sinai and the giving of the Torah, um, it it talks about seeing the voices. And so in Judaism, we're very, you know, we talk a lot about how it was such an extrasensory experience. So, you know, there's the two versions which don't line up exactly with each other, right? And the understanding within Judaism is that it was just such an extraordinary experience that it is beyond simple description, right? and that's why it says that they saw the voices, right? Because it it was as incredible and indescribable as the the sight of sound.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of maybe a description of what I was experiencing as I was writing through that part. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny. I I, I did a few. I did 3 episodes of my Hebrew Bible in English thing on on the Ten Commandments and Sinai, and obviously there's the 2 versions. But before we started on the 2 versions, I decided I needed to kind of preface it with 2 of the Psalms that talk about the experience of Sinai, because in my experience, Christians don't necessarily relate the two. I think it was Psalm 19, which talks about, the voice of God, um, shaking the mountains and making them skip like like lambs, and talks about the um, river turning back, right?
Mhm.
And it's not obvious, although I think it is obvious, but I think if you're not paying attention, you might not recognize that those psalms are talking about what happened at Sinai, because
Mm.
in the Jewish conception, right? So we believe that part of the reason that the Ten Commandments are so universally accepted is because the revelation was so pure and universal that the Ten Commandments were, in essence, etched into creation and into human beings and
Mm.
into our hearts, in a way that the rest of the Bible isn't. Um, and that's why even somebody like Sam Harris will have a natural um, recognition of them, right? The Ten Commandments, they seem so fundamental, so absolutely undeniable. And part of that, we believe, is because when God spoke at Sinai, the heavens and the earth met, right?
Mm.
That experience etched the Ten Commandments into reality, in a real way, so that that part of spirituality is, like Jesus says, "Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven." Um, that part of God's will was revealed on earth as it is in heaven. Yeah.
That's interesting.
I don't know where we go from that. I mean, it's like I'm sitting there thinking about the Ten Commandments, but I do want to ask you about your prayer life. Um, so as much as you want to describe it, where do you get your prayers from? Where do you decide, okay, this is, I mean, is it is it at any time, you're composing that prayer on the spot? Is it spontaneous? Is it uh do you do the Job Hail Mary thing?
Um, the thing that I do is something that I got from a pastor that I used to listen to quite frequently. He's a pastor out in California of a a Christian, like Protestant denomination of a church out there. And he said that, I think I'm remembering this right. He said that this is one of the ways that C.S. Lewis would pray. And I'm a huge C.S. Lewis fan. And so I was like, oh, that's interesting. Essentially, the way that I understood it is Lewis kind of had a list of everybody that was in his sphere that he would pray for. And so on and off over the years, like I've kind of used that same method of, if there was a while where I was doing it where I had a list of, all the people that I knew I was going to see every day. And so they became a part of my list, and they were just people that I found that if I kind of put all of them at the front of my day and was talking to God about them, that would kind of help our interactions go better in the day. And at the very least, sometimes that didn't work. It's not like it's a magic, it's not like it's a magic lever that you pull or a magic wand that you wave and say, oh yes, I prayed for this person today, and now, we're not going to get into a fight, or we're not going to have, conflict or anything like that. But that's a part of what I do in prayer. I've also incorporated some of the things that they suggested from Exodus 90, which is, try to have a slice of time in your prayer where you just talk to God about whatever's on your mind, whether it's a decision that you're struggling over, or just something that's going on in life, or, just something that you have in mind. Try to do that. And then there's another section, I guess, at the end of it that I also got from this pastor in California, where it's a prayer. It's a prayer from Ephesians that Paul offers for. I can't even remember exactly what it is now. I haven't read it in so long, like what part of Ephesians it's from. But it's essentially just praying for, God's Spirit, and, in Pauline fashion, the Spirit of Christ to basically prepare a place in essentially all of the people that I just prayed for to know and to be able to understand the love that God has for everyone, and to be able to grab hold of that, and to embrace it, or to be embraced by it. I'm giving it a lot more than maybe is in there, but that's kind of the way that I perceive it, and it's a part of what I'm asking for. And so that's kind of, when I do get to work through all of these 3 different segments of prayer, because sometimes I don't give enough time to be able to do all of this. But on a day where I take the time, or I have the time to do it all because I didn't, oversleep, or, not being slothful, where I can get through that full prayer, that's kind of the thirds, it's broken down into those 3 sections.
Okay. So were you baptized as a baby?
Not that I know of. No.
Okay. And then, so you had your experience when you were 4. Did you speak to your parents about it?
I don't think so. Honestly, no. I don't think I ever talked to anybody about it until, I started telling everybody on the internet about it.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I've talked to my wife about it. I've talked to people who are really, really close to me, but there's not been a lot. I've never, yeah, that's a good question. I hadn't even really reflected on that. I've never talked to really anybody about my quote unquote conversion experience.
Okay.
Like
So when were you baptized?
not until I was mid 20s, like maybe 26 or 27.
Okay. And what made you decide to get baptized then?
A girl.
Okay. So she was like, you need to be baptized, and you're like, okay.
No, not at all. She decided that she needed to be baptized.
Okay.
And um, she was in Christian evangelical circles, she was what people would call a new believer, even though she grew up in a different Christian tradition. Evangelicals who like maybe bring people in who were born in the Catholic Church. And maybe even they were, I can't remember if Catholicism baptizes infants or sprinkles or something like that. I think they do. So like even if, in more Christian and conservative evangelical circles, well, even if you had that happen, it wasn't a full immersion baptism, so it doesn't count, And are you like committing your life to Jesus, and are you really into this? And, do you want to accept Christ as your savior? You probably didn't feel like you necessarily had that, overt intellectual assent to all of these things. And so we want to drive you down that path, or we want I say that the wrong way. We want to shepherd you along. We want to come alongside you if that's what you are feeling led to do.
Right.
And so at the time, the person that I was dating was like feeling all of that at the church that we had gone to. Like when she and I first met, she wasn't going to church, and I invited her to come to the mega church, Christian, evangelical church that I was going to. And she just was all in and got really involved in, their youth program, like volunteering as like a youth leader and things like that. And she decided she wanted to get baptized. And I was like, well, hang on just a second. I feel like I've been a follower of Christ and since I was 4 years old. It doesn't seem right that you will go be baptized and I won't be. That just seems kind of strange to me. It never seemed strange to me before. It was almost like I have like this defiant, stubborn streak in me. And so part of I guess the theology that was sown into me, or the way that maybe it wasn't even sown into me, but the way I kind of took it and let it grow and develop was just like I feel like I've known Christ since I was 4 years old. What's the reason that I need to get baptized? That's not going to do anything to change. And this wasn't what people were saying to me, but it's almost like I was putting up this straw man of, no, I'm not going to prove to you that, I have Christ in my life by going out and doing this, this act. That was a part of it. That was maybe like a tiny part of it. Another part of it was I just never really felt any internal motivation to go do it. I never even thought to pray about it and say, oh, is this something, God, that you feel like I should even do? I never even felt a need to even ask that question.
So did your church, that was the church you were going to, did it have a process of encouraging people to get baptized? Or did they kind of assume everybody got baptized as children and they left it at that?
So this was during the 90s. And I don't know how familiar you are with this. Paul talks about it every once in a while on his channel. Like there was a seeker sensitive movement, where it's just like, hey, and they made churches, look more like movie theaters, and you could come in and hear, music that sounded more like what you would hear outside of church. And then they get like really dynamic speakers who were really good and really talented at, driving home certain points and getting your emotions amped up. And so that was kind of the model of, and there was always like an altar call at the end of most of those sermons. It's just like, if you want to dedicate your life to Christ today, that's come down here and do it. We'll pray for you. And oh, by the way, in a couple of weeks, we're having a baptism. So if you want to sign up for baptism, sign up for it. But there was no like, hey, you're here in this church. if you're going to keep coming here and become a part of this, here's the path that you have to go on, kind of thing. Like they did have that behind the scenes for people who wanted to say, yeah, I want to be all in. I want to really be involved. I want to do everything that I can to help, support this community and all of the programs and everything that it has going on. But there was also a lot of opportunity for people to just come in and like I was doing and just, well, I kind of feel like I want to be back in church because I was raised in church and I'd stopped going for about like 6 years, and from my teens to my mid 20s, my late teens to my mid 20s. And so I would just go and, all right, I'm just like dipping my foot back into the water of church, and I'm very skeptical, and for various reasons, I don't, trust people who are leaders in religious institutions. I feel like I can't trust them. I feel like I don't want to put my faith in them, all this kind of stuff. And not that anybody was asking me to, but there was a part of me that's just like, yeah, that person's a phony up there. I don't really believe, that I bet they have a very different life of the things that they're preaching. And I had no good reasons for that of the people that were up there doing that. I just had this assumption, just based on some things that had happened in personal relationships in my life. So I was projecting that onto the religion that was given to me by my family at the time. And so this was a process for me of kind of like figuring out, is this my religion or is it my family's religion? I really felt like I needed to distinguish, is this something that I'm going to move forward with, or is it something different? The whole time, just kind of leaving in limbo this idea of, but wait a second, you have this presence that's always there in your life. What does this have to do with all of that? There wasn't like a lot of conscious thinking it through. So anyway, yeah, I eventually went along with her, and I was just like, well, if you're getting baptized, I need to get baptized. I kind of feel like, I don't know. I kind of feel like the phony if I'm not doing something like this.
Did the church practice communion at all, or did you go to communion ever?
They do, like in more Protestant denomination, in the Protestant world of Christianity, communion isn't the sacrament that it is in Christian or in Catholic and Orthodox circles, right? Protestants are really more focused on, in the Gospels, Jesus said, "Do this in remembrance of me," and that's like etched on the altar of a lot of churches. Do this in remembrance of me, and so it's the idea is, hey, this is something that we do because Christ commanded it, and it's a symbol of his love for us, and it's a reminder of the sacrifice that he made, where he gave up his life the night after he had this Passover meal with his disciples. And so we do that in remembrance, and so it's not done every service. It's probably like done on a monthly basis of just hey, let's remember what Christ did for us, kind of thing.
And there's no requirement that anybody be baptized or anything like that to participate?
No, not in most of those circles. A lot of the traditions that I grew up in, if they did communion, it was what they call an open table, where anybody can come. The most that they would do, though, is they would the way that they would interpret one of the Pauline epistles where he talks about taking communion, is the way that they would interpret where he talked about that is, you need to check your heart with Christ right now and say, do I have like any unconfessed sin? Is there anything going on in my life where I'm not really living the way that I know I need to be living, and I need to confess that just between myself and God right now, because also in Protestantism, it's like I don't have to confess my sins to another person for God to hear them, and for atonement's the wrong word, absolution, essentially, which is something that I've learned barely, but just a little bit more about in Catholicism. In Protestant traditions, it's like, no, it is you and God, and you can have those conversations with God, and you can get that absolution with God right then and there. And so, yeah, there's to answer your question, there's no like requirements of, okay, are you baptized? Check. Have you gone through catechesis? Check. Have you gone through all these classes? All right, you're a formal member. Now you can finally take communion. It was nothing like that.
So when you had kids, did you think it was important to get them baptized? Did you get them baptized as kids? How did that affect you in raising your children?
I didn't. Our youngest, my wife wanted him to, like, they didn't do like infant baptism or anything like that in this church. Like you had to be old enough to kind of know the decision that you were making before they would baptize you. So that's really the only requirement, is that you're making an adult decision to say, yeah, I want to let everybody in the world know that I've decided to follow Jesus, basically. And so the most that we did there was like, they would do like baby dedications, which is kind of like soft infant baptism without even going in that direction. It's just like, well, hey, it was an opportunity for the family to bring their child up to like the front of the church and say, hey, we want to dedicate this child to God, and we want to raise this child to, love and serve God, and to, serve others the way that God wants us to. And so we are basically pledging to raise our child in the church, essentially. So that's all that happened there. And then with my second child, I was divorced. Well, no, I was divorced probably when my second child was, I want to say 5 years old. And at that time, I was kind of going to church on my own at that point, and I was taking the kids. But to answer your question, again, it was never like it never seemed really important to me to make sure that the kids were baptized. Now, both of my kids are baptized, but it was a choice that they decided to do later on, once they were teenagers. So they've both been baptized in a Protestant church.
Do you feel like you're becoming more liturgical, like things are becoming more sacramental, like you are being kind of drawn towards that Eastern Orthodoxy, Catholicism, like everybody on the server seems to be?
Probably not in any practical ways. Like,
Oh, come on, you did Exodus 90. You're
I did
practically a Catholic.
do Exodus 90, and yes, Father Eric's hopes, I think, got up there for a little while that, oh, Jeff might be turning Catholic. We had even talked about for a little while, maybe we'll start doing a podcast called Getting Catholic after this. And it was kind of like a play on words, because I was just like, just help me understand what these things mean. Because in Exodus 90, they also had like these daily devotionals that you would read through. And of course, they were written by Catholics and people who had been to Catholic seminary. And like they talked about some concepts in there. I was just like, whoa, wait a second, I've never heard this before. Is this just normal Catholic teaching? And they're like, oh yeah, Father Eric was in there, and Andrew was in there, and they're both, cradle Catholics. And they're just like, yeah, I know it probably sounds pretty weird to people who have never heard this before. But I was just like, okay, well, just help me get it, or help me understand it. And so every once in a while, Father Eric was my buddy who I would check in with every day. And every once in a while, I'd have a new question for him about Catholicism. But yeah, so Exodus 90, it didn't turn me Catholic. I still haven't been to a Catholic mass. I've been to a couple different Catholic weddings. That's the closest that I've been to a Catholic mass. But yeah, I've also attended an Eastern Orthodox, what they call Divine Liturgy on a Sunday morning. I've been to that. And I don't know. I don't know what to say about it. It was fine, but it was just like, I've heard these other experiences where it's just like, oh, it just grabbed me, from people who grew up in similar traditions that I grew up in. And nothing's just grabbed me yet.
Yeah. It's really interesting to me because you're very obviously very dedicated to Christianity, and we certainly in academic circles and theological circles, we would say that the more Christian and the more Protestant you are, the more it is based on your system of theology and belief and faith. And when you move towards Catholicism, maybe there's more sacrament and works based. And then supposedly the difference between Christianity and Judaism is that Judaism is more about orthopraxy, actually doing the things as opposed to necessarily thinking the right things. And you're about as Protestant gets. But at the same time, I kind of feel like whenever I talk to you, it's it's so much your Christianity is so based on the things that you do, right?
Mm,
The actions that you take, the decisions. You seem to have made a lot more decisions about, okay, I'm going to go to church, I'm going to get baptized, I'm going to uh, take communion or not, I'm gonna, how I'm gonna raise my kids. You seem to have made the practical choices without getting involved in all of the theologies and, the Heidelberg Catechism versus the Westminster Confession, where you don't seem as occupied with any of what Paul calls the three forms of unity, right?
right.
All of those things you are supposed to believe, as you are with just simply sitting down and writing the Bible out longhand. You're not writing a commentary on the Bible, you're just writing the Bible,
Yeah.
right? And th- there seems to be an incredible conflict there, right? Uh, you're like, well, yeah, every day I sit down and I write the Bible and I pray and I have, but as far as the theology behind it, um, you're not sitting there reading theology books.
Right.
You're not having theology arguments, you know, that the types of things that Sam does, or even, I'm constantly arguing with theology with people. That's not what you do. You just sit there and write the Bible. You understand what I mean?
Yeah. I
I'm declaring you not Protestant. I'm sorry, you're not Protestant
I'm
anymore.
not Protestant. Yeah. I mean, I don't I don't have many protests with people theologically.
Yeah, that's the thing, one thing that really hit me within the last couple of weeks, both Pajot and PVK said this, and I was shocked at the idea, but it was the fact that it was PVK and Pajot who are two of the most institutional Christians that I know, right? Well, I guess not as much as Father Eric, but they they both talked about the idea of Christianity dying and being resurrected. And obviously, this is a very foreign idea to me. I never even considered it. The idea that somebody as involved in Christianity as Pajot or PVK would speak almost hopefully about the church dying and being resurrected,
Mhm.
um, was actually quite shocking to me. But at the same time, it seems like to at least to the Christians I speak to, um, that's that's not that's not that as foreign of an idea as I thought it would be to them. If somebody were to talk to me about Judaism dying,
Right.
I would be outraged.
Yeah.
And I would never think to suggest to Christians that they should hope for the death and resurrection. And there's a reason why I keep on saying and resurrection, because obviously these aren't people who are hoping for Christianity to cease,
Right.
but to view the process of the continuation of Christianity through a sort of death, that was very surprising to me.
Yeah, I have to be honest, growing up, I don't know that that concept was ever really talked about or focused on in the, more fundamental conservative traditions that I grew up in. Because there, it really was less about the religion itself and more about the person of Christ. And I mean, there's a lot of anti-intellectualism, I think sounds pejorative, and I don't mean it that way. Maybe anti-intellectualism is the wrong way of saying it, but less of a focus on the wisdom or there's more of an equating of the intellect of man can only aspire for so much, and the wisdom of man can only go so far, and it cannot reach wisdom, capital W, wisdom, the person, as personified in God, or as the perfect wisdom that exudes from God, maybe is the way to say it. And so, in those traditions, at least the ones that I grew up in, it's just like, I'm not really worried about being focused on all of these ideas or how these things work or whatever. I just really nest my whole being in my trust that God will take care of everything, that God will take care of me. If there's something that I need to do, God's going to tell me to do it. God's going to convey that in some way to me. If I do need to learn something, or if I do need to go to school, or I do need to focus specifically on my intellect for a task that God wants me to carry out, well, then yeah, I'll do that. And God will equip me to do that. That's kind of, the general idea as I have grown to understand, the way it was being approached. And it wasn't like these were necessarily direct messages, but these are just like things that you pick up in the ether of those environments. And so, I guess that's a part of what I've taken with me. I haven't been that like strongly interested in Armenianism versus I don't know what, because I'll just pick up one little phrase here and I'm just like, I don't know the difference between this or that, or I don't know what Anabaptist is, and I don't know what, I know what a Protestant is, and I know what a Catholic is. That's about it. I knew I came up on the Protestant side, and we're not really so sure. We know some things were going wrong with Catholicism, which is why we needed the Reformation and why we became Protestants, that kind of thing. And, there's a big part of me that's just like, well, Jesus was kind of at the start of all that stuff anyway. So I'm just gonna do my best to listen and to try and follow when I can, when my own selfish desires aren't getting in the way, which is not often enough. I too often want to just, I just want to do what I want to do and focus on what I want to do. So yeah, I can't remember what you said that made me start thinking and talking about all that. But yeah, I guess, yeah, you've seen it. I don't get it. I don't get involved in these discussions because, number one, I don't have anything that I feel like I can contribute to them on the intellectual level. My wife says I don't do myself justice. I say this a
You
lot.
don't.
I don't think I'm smart enough to have those kind of conversations.
It's not true. Not true at all.
But I will say that I'm not educated enough to have strong opinions one way or the other on
You're
those.
a lot more educated than most of the people who have strong opinions. Trust me, as someone with very strong opinions, that it is very true that oftentimes the people who I like to think that I am not as ignorant as most of the people I end up uh, out out mouthing, but uh, that's not the trajectory. I've often found that the people who know the most speak the least.
Oh, well, I have one of the things that my granddad told me when I was young. I've now since seen this verse in Proverbs, and I pretty much, you know, think that that's where he got it from. But he essentially said, he told me, um, it's better to just keep your mouth shut and have people think that you're smart than to open up your mouth and disprove what they think. And there's a more cogent way that that's said in Proverbs, but
There's a lot of wisdom in that, but also, and this is, I think, is a rabbinic saying. I don't believe it's in the it's in the Bible. It says "Shtikat siag lechokma," that being quiet is a fence for wisdom. Is it helps grow with it helps wisdom grow because you know you 2 ears, one mouth, right? Uh,
yep.
actually listening to people, um, and this is, I mean, obviously one of those lessons I need to take to heart. But listening to people more, I think. Let me put it this way: it's always the people who are least willing to share their opinions um, that I often want to hear from
Mm,
because um, one of two things is usually happening. Either they're thinking about interesting things that need to be discussed and they're seeing things that nobody is saying, or they are thinking things which um, are not being discussed, and that actually causes problems to fester.
mm,
So either way, um, I think I think it's incredibly important to uh, be aware of, and this is something that the internet does the opposite of, right? When we are sitting in a group, right, and there's 5 or 6 of us, and we're talking, and one person doesn't say anything, um, you would hope that eventually people would notice and go, "Hey, so what do you think?"
mhm,
Right? And you're actually really good at this whenever you've been involved in discussions, including at the fishing trip. You would be like, "Okay, so you talk now and you tell us." Um, and on unfortunately on the internet there's no propensity for that. There's a lot of lurkers, um, and even, I mean, the small number of the lurkers who will just directly message me, um, there is an indication that there's a lot more people paying attention, a lot more people involved in these discussions
mm,
than we see, and we invite to participate, and we include, um, and that's, I mean, I think that may be the biggest problem with the internet. It's like you only hear the people who are willing to talk, and some people are willing to even pretend to be multiple people, right? And they'll have, yeah, and they will actually create discussions for themselves with themselves, right? um, and they will dominate the discussion, and so many people who need to be included as human beings. Um, there's no mechanism for recognizing even that they're there, much less what they have to say.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the aspects of Discord in particular. Um, it depends on the temperament of the person too. Some people are very introverted, and a lot of introverts end up on the internet. Now, a lot of extroverts end up there too, especially on Twitter. Um, but uh, once you get the hang of Discord, like when you first deploy and you're dropped in to the war zone of of the general chat, you get noticed right away. And most of the time, people are very friendly and welcoming and say, "Hey, welcome, glad to see you here. What brought you here?" And try to engage in a discussion. Sometimes people come in, and it's at times where people aren't paying attention, and they do sit back and lurk. I know of one person in particular early on in Bridges of Meaning that I'd had some conversations with, who just ultimately said, I kind of feel like I don't fit in just because I don't feel like I have anything to contribute. And it's hard to, in that forum, find the people who feel like they don't know how to be involved. It's back to your point that you made at the beginning of our discussion. It's so much easier and important for us to be able to find ways to be in person, because you can pick up so much from body language in a group. We detect things, we see things, we are tracking things on so many different levels all the time, consciously and unconsciously. And it's easier to facilitate discussions when you can see the other person, and you can see somebody who is sitting there and being quiet or doesn't quite know how to engage. And there are different techniques that you can apply to facilitate discussion, to kind of help people like that I don't think we've quite solved yet in a Discord forum.
I think one of the greatest things that human beings can do is be around each other without necessarily saying anything. You know, just just sitting there, and even if you don't say anything, just being there in community, in communion with each other, right?
Mhm.
Um, and that's something you just can't do online.
Yeah. Yeah. There are definitely limitations to this virtual space that we've been forced into for the last more than a year now, I guess.
Well, it's more than that. Yes, I mean, it's funny. Before COVID, I had been trying to limit my internet and trying to stay off the internet and trying to, I was going to the Jordan Peterson meetup because I was trying to meet people like-minded. I was trying to do things. Um, and then, uh, unfortunately, COVID just made that completely impossible to some extent.
Mhm.
Um, hopefully, it will eventually go away, or at least we'll decide that we need human companionship more than we need to fear even, you know, there are worse things than death. There are.
To quote Jafar in Aladdin.
Didn't see it, but I believe you. Yes, I don't think he's the only one who said there's worse things than death. But
Yeah.
um, honestly, like, one of my fantasies, which I don't see actually happening, is kind of like a Bridges of Meaning commune of sorts, right?
Mm.
Even if it's just a vacation spot that we could, you know, go and visit and see other people. Um,
You you made me think of So I've watched like almost the first 2 seasons of that Amazon show, The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel.
Oh, yeah, I did see that. Yes. Okay.
Okay. So, I know nothing about Jewish culture because, I'm a Christian Protestant growing up in the US. So, we're not required to know anything about Jewish culture. But yeah, watching that show, you just reminded me of, because they live in New York, they live like in the
And they
city,
go to the Catskills.
and they go to the Catskills and they go to that, exactly what you're describing is what popped up into my mind.
Yeah, yeah. And it's funny, I think, the Yiddish theater, those talent shows that they talk about, actually, you know, so before now, mostly Yiddish is a language that is used in religious communities. Um, Before modern Hebrew became as ascendant, there was a lot more secular Yiddish culture, which was and it's funny, like I am the biggest critic of secular Jewish culture, but what secular Jewish culture did allow was a sense of community even for the people who weren't necessarily religious. And um, I guess in a sense, maybe the religion that isn't a religion um, could learn from that, you know, uh, having plays, having that type of communal experience is important. I, I just I just think the most important lesson from Jewish attempts at having a religion that isn't a religion has been the realization that you can't have a religion that's not a religion. It, as much as it functioned to some extent, I don't think it functions well.
It seems like, and this isn't exclusive to secular, did you call it secular Judaism?
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
Yeah,
Secular Jewish culture, yeah.
secular Jewish culture. Okay, yeah, that's what you said. It seems like more and more, just maybe it's just secularism, and I haven't read any of those books like A Secular Age or some of the things that Paul Vanderklay talks about, but it seems like more and more there's like this desire to um, desire maybe isn't the right word. It's like the only way that a lot of people feel like they can make sense of their reality is I have to be able to have the best in life, but not um, not admit the idea that there is this actual being out there, that there is this person who is over everything, including me. Um, it makes me think of that quote that Eric Weinstein said, and I've only heard it from Paul, who says that Eric Weinstein said this, which is, if there is a God, we have to worry about what's on his mind. And it seems like the religion that's not a religion is I'm looking, I find meaning and importance in all of this communal stuff. I just can't go that far with the idea that there is this hyper being, super being, whatever, that there is God that we all need to be paying attention to and thinking about what's on God's mind and how that relates to how we do this community thing.
Well, so this is another thing I actually thought about bringing up was I keep on I've started saying recently, an individual human is not a viable life form. And really, we're not, you know,
Yeah.
but we have this idea of the individual, um, and I'm actually using this word very specifically, divorced from everyone else, right? So, especially, you know, in Los Angeles, where I'm living in a single apartment, right? And everyone around me is also living in single apartments,
Yeah.
right? Because um, we don't have that type of connection with each other where we have to compromise and live with each other's humanity, right?
Right.
One thing we've been talking a lot about on my server is the um, the problem of, well, Paul's also been talking on his channel, but the problem of picking a church and becoming a part of that church and being a part of people who you cannot, you may dislike things about them and you have to live with that,
Yeah.
right?
You
um
can't divorce yourself from them. Yeah.
right, yeah. And also, I mean, one thing I've noticed, a lot of my clients are, especially in Los Angeles, because of the type of culture we have here with the entertainment industry. A lot of my clients are people who are getting older, who have no spouse, no kids, no family, only friends. And they're getting into situations where they're getting older and older. And at some point, you need people around you who are willing to be around you even though you are falling apart.
Mm,
It's no longer fun. It's no longer to their benefit,
right.
right? Um, and we we've lost the bounds. The Hebrew word is kesher. The relationships, the things that tie us together,
Mhm.
right? Um, I know that my parents, as they get older, because they are my parents, they changed my diapers, and at some point I may have to change their diapers, that
Yeah.
type of thing,
Yep.
right? And the types of relationships we have with each other currently as friends, and even in marriages, for a lot of people, it's like, well, yeah, of course we'll be married as long as it's good for the both of us. But you know, if you get cancer and or you become sick and you're no fun anymore, then why am I in this relationship?
Right. Yeah, I hmm. Yeah, I've heard it said like the thing that you're talking about that is needed for those examples that you just gave, like the person who's getting older and their body is falling apart, or you know, the perfectly healthy person that then gets struck with cancer and has like 4 to 6 years to live, and it just gets worse and worse, you know, as time goes on. Um, the thing that's needed in those situations is a person or a group of people who say your benefit at my expense. And I steal that wording, you know, from Paul, because he's said that pretty often in his videos. It's just become, you know, kind of rote for me. But I think that's right. And that is a muscle that can atrophy if you don't work at developing it.
Yeah.
Well, I actually have to run, but I really appreciate your invitation, and I've really enjoyed our conversation, Jacob.
This has been incredible. Yes. We have to do this again. I'll give you the
For
last
sure.
word.
For sure.
What do you want to say?
Um, I mean, I'm glad that you came onto the Bridges of Meaning server, and I'm glad you came back to it.
No, I'm guessing a lot of people don't know what we're talking about, which is good. Yeah, we'll have to talk about that next time. Okay.
Yeah, next time you can give all the dirty behind the scenes and tell us everything that happened.
I'll talk to you later.
All right, bye.
Bye.